Well, good morning, everybody. And if you'll just indulge me for a moment, you may not know of DHL Neutral Services. We've been in stealth mode. We've been crawling around, doing things. And I have to say, I'm going to change the tone somewhat from the previous two speakers. I was talking with one of my colleagues in Bonn, a board member of our company, last week. He said, Karl, I just want you to know that we understand that climate change is more important than the global financial crisis. And I'm not trying to take everybody down a peg or two, but we will fix this problem. Listening to the professor's theories, maybe we'll get it sorted out. But climate change is rolling on, and it's impacting us all the time. Now, 2 years ago, in fact, nearly 2 years to the day, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Friday night, and there was a knock on the door. And a friend of mine, looking very bedraggled on a Friday evening, came and he said, look, mate, I've just had a real kick-in from the board. Can I come and have a drink with you? And he sat down, and my wife rustled up some really nice lamb shank for dinner. And we sat and discussed his challenge. He said, I've been told to fix the carbon problem for DHL. And I haven't made enough progress, so Karl, what can I do about this? I said, I don't know, what do you think we can do? He said, I'll tell you what, why don't you go and find me a silver bullet, and whoever is making it will buy the company, and then we'll get the edge on the market and we'll be able to solve this problem. I said, all right, mate, another few glasses of wine. And I then spent about 2 weeks investigating this. It feels like 2 years. 2 weeks investigating this, and I came back to him and I said, do you know what, mate? There is no silver bullet. And therein is actually the secret. This is not going to be one single thing that you can do that's actually going to change the way that the organisation deals with carbon. There's going to be a whole raft of things. It's taken us nearly 300 years to agree on an accounting standard. It's taken us about 4 or 5 years to try and work out how to count carbon, and we still haven't quite got it right. Another 2 weeks later, and I was actually put in front of the DHL board with my proposal, which was that we form a specialist team extracted from the CSR group, but a specialist team as part of the finance division that should just look at carbon. And before you all doze off to sleep and think that I'm some sort of tree hugger, I want to point out I'm not an environmentalist. Far from it. I'm just trying to save the planet. I'm trying to save the planet by being something that I have to say, standing here today, for the first time in my entire career, I'm proud to say I'm an engineer. 20 years ago at dinner parties, Karl, what do you do? Oh, I'm an engineer. I've got a really funny rattle under the bonnet. Can you come outside and have a listen? Engineers, not about engines, about genius, about creating solutions to problems. So I love the suggestion that Mark made that this is something that's going to come from innovation, because there is real innovation out there and things that we can do that are going to make a difference to this challenge. So I want to link today this issue of energy and the issue of carbon, because these are two intrinsically linked. What is our reality at DHL? Well, first of all, I think we have to do more to push and explain our brand. My stepfather took delivery of something from DHL recently, and the delivery man came up to his door in his retirement home in Eastbourne and said, so, here's your package. And my stepfather said, oh, what's it like working for a German company? And the delivery man said, no, DHL's not German, it's Belgian. The interesting thing is it was Belgian about 5 years ago, and the communication hadn't got out to the delivery man. But the reality is that we're owned by Deutsche Post, and we're part of one of the world's largest organisations. As such, we're in an extremely nice position. We have almost monopoly. The monopoly ended last year, but we have almost a monopoly on delivery of postal systems into the German market. We have a very, very good supply chain business around the world. And we've just, as you probably read in the newspapers, sold a big chunk of our remaining banking asset. This has put us in a very strong position with an interesting opportunity for the future. So coming back to one of the things that you were saying, we know how our business works and we know how we can get more efficiency out of it. But we also see that there will be other less strong players in the marketplace that we can take advantage of. And one of the ways we can do that is to look for efficiency through our existing operations. Yes, we have already for years and years and years been looking for efficiency, but that conversation 2 years ago, which came on the back of our board going to Davos, and listening to the World Economic Forum speeches, came off the back of Lord Stern's report, and came off the back of Al Gore's movie Inconvenient Truth, suddenly focused the mind that here was something that we should actually be addressing, and that we could get competitive advantage from it if we took early steps. It's a real problem, and I would try my best to distill down the IPCC's statement from 2 years ago. Global warming is real, climate change is happening, it's a serious problem, and we humans are the cause. And I did this speech about a year ago in the United States, and had incredible hostile questioning from the audience. How can you spout such rubbish, such unproven scientific theories? And I'm thinking, still today, you can't possibly challenge this. The IPCC was set up 20 years ago to get together 4,000 scientists from all over the world to come up with their own theory on what's actually happening. And after 20 years, they said, we're 95% sure it's anthropogenic. Now, I don't want to bet on the 5%. I'd sooner align strategy with the 95%. There's a lot of confusion in the marketplace as to what's actually going on. There's certainly a feeling in Germany that you have to suffer for your carbon. That if you want to take a green carbon-reducing option, this is going to cost more money. Well, we've successfully proved internally that that is not the case. Every carbon-related project that we've undertaken has actually reduced operating costs and saved money. In many cases, it's been cheaper to operate a less carbon alternative than a carbon-based alternative. And our customers are changing the way that they evaluate options. We recently won a very large deal spanning over 10 years, and the major differentiator was that in our response to the customer's tender, we put in full carbon calculations for both warehousing, trucking, and for the resupply. And that was the first time that we'd done that on such a large tender, and it made the difference for us. The other thing, of course, is that the general public wants to pay less for their goods, and looking at our model, our second and our third largest operating costs are actually going to increase. If the professor's right, and we're going to see a dramatic increase in oil price again, then certainly that's going to impact us dramatically. Last year we used 290 million litres of diesel. Even worse than that, the average fuel consumption of most of our large trucks is 6.5 miles per gallon. Do we not think we could do slightly better than that? I think we could probably improve that considerably. Next time you go to Heathrow, you'll actually be using some of our services. We have a consolidation centre outside Heathrow where all the deliveries come in for all the shops at Heathrow. We then load all of that stuff onto one electric 9.5-ton truck, and we deliver it to Terminal 1, pick up all their rubbish and all the cardboard, ship it back to the depot, then go to Terminal 2 and carry on round. So we do deliveries in there in a consolidated form. We've tried the same thing for Bristol, and there's no reason why we shouldn't do it for other cities. Consolidate outside of the city centre, and then reduce congestion, reduce pollution by having short runs done into the city centre. I think, therefore, we've got an interesting opportunity, exactly as you were saying, for the organisations that are self-aware and know where things are going and have a pretty good idea about how to exploit these opportunities. I think we're in a strong position to do that. Last year, 2 years of lobbying ended up with us making our statement that we are committed to a carbon reduction target. This took a lot of work. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes lobbying, a lot of calculations. But with 14% of global emissions coming from the supply chain industry, we have to do something about it. So we've committed to a 10% reduction by 2012 and a 30% reduction by 2020. Now the interesting thing about that is these are efficiency targets. And these are related to every packet we deliver, every lorry that we drive, every vehicle we move. Everything has an efficiency target, and we're now measuring these things in order to rank how we're doing. We put together our own Go Green program and brought together some talent from all over the business in order to drive this through. So one of the ways that we've reacted as a real business to doing things is to bring in unconventional people who think slightly differently, who actually challenge the conventional wisdom, who don't say that 6.5 miles per gallon for a big truck is reasonable. They say, well, why can't we do better than that? In fact, why are we driving so many trucks? In fact, why don't we drive more electric vehicles? Which brings me to an interesting story. Last year I went to one of the big car manufacturers, slightly before they went into meltdown, and I said to them, we're really interested in electric vehicles. And they said, electric vehicles. I said, well, we've got 49,000 postmen delivering post on a daily basis in Germany, and they all have diesel vehicles. Small vehicles, most of them little cars with a bit of a box on the back of them. We'd like to replace them over the next few years with electric vehicles. The head of research said to me, Karl, you have to understand that these things take a while. I said, well, yeah. He said, you have to understand that this is new technology and it's going to take a while for us to bed it in. So anybody who would like to buy an aluminium-bodied electric vehicle that does as a top speed 62 miles an hour, that has a range of 50 miles, which is actually more than most of us commute. Anybody interested? Think so? Well, you could have bought it April 1899. In fact, right until 1920, all the land speed records were held by electric vehicles. Coming back to this chap who was showing me around his factory, I was saying to him, well, there's been electric vehicles and the technology's been around for over 100 years. This is not new. In fact, it was more established before the advent of cheap oil. And he said, well, Karl, we have to build a new factory. It's more complicated. I said, no, there's less moving parts. We don't need to have 16 valves in every engine. We just need to have a big coil and a couple of magnets, and then it works. Anyway, he came up with many excuses. And then he said, well, Karl, I'll tell you what, within the next 3 or 4 years, you can have a prototype, and it'll cost you 200,000 euros. I said, you've got to be crazy. He said, no, it's going to take us a while to configure this. I then threw at him my killer. In 1938, Deutsche Post had 2,800 electric delivery trucks delivering the mail in Germany. Now, we can't all remember that, I'm sure, but the reality is that we do have these old technologies. They are around. It is possible for us to leverage them, and we have to challenge big oil and its links into the auto industry and say, sorry, but we want you to move quicker. We really would like you to do something about this. And I would rather hope that at DHL we could have a little bit of clout here. We have 100,000 vehicles worldwide. Now, out of those 100,000, most of them could be replaced by electrics, if only the industry would produce vehicles that we could use. One of the key challenges when we set up this business unit 2 years ago was to try to define what the challenge actually is. Eating the elephant is very difficult if you don't know what an elephant looks like, if you've never met one. So we said, well, we need some steps, so we came up with 4 steps. We're going to assess our carbon footprint, we're going to reduce it by improving efficiency of existing assets. We're going to replace those assets with lower carbon versions of the same asset, and once we've done all that, we will neutralize it by buying carbon offsets. 4 steps, relatively straightforward. We then blended that with the 3 stages of the greenhouse gas protocol, which are effectively scope 1 is emissions that you directly emit, scope 2 is emissions relating to bought electricity, and scope 3 is our suppliers' emissions. You can see where this is going now. We're going to end up with a matrix. So we then ended up breaking that down into 3 things, transport, property and operations, and then said, okay, it's a 4x3 matrix, let's fill in all the things that we need to do. And that is the totality of our carbon project. It may seem big. It involves 520,000 people in every country on the planet, but it's finite and it's not scary. What is the fuel consumption from each vehicle? Knowing that we used 290 million litres of diesel last year in the UK is not very useful when it comes to trying to improve the situation, because I want to know whether it was Fred driving like a nutter or it was John, who actually is a more sensible driver. So we need to have the detail at a more granular level than we've ever collected before. This is the basis of our movement forwards. We've been doing a lot of work on this, and we haven't been telling people about it. One of the things we have recently announced is our first carbon neutral warehouse. And this isn't an easy task. This on the left is a picture of the way that the warehouse was before we started. It's a 16-year-old warehouse. It was horrible, old, cold, leaky. We didn't pick a brand new one that we thought was going to be easy to turn carbon neutral. This one had a carbon footprint of 960 tons of carbon dioxide per year. We had a look at the heating. We had a look at the way that the space was organized. We put in we're a bunch of engineers. We put a bunch of thermocouples in, we measured the temperature at different levels in the warehouse, we looked at the operational flows, we actually carried out a three-dimensional modeling of the thermodynamic flows of the building to try and work out how we could improve it. And actually it was quite simple. Let's close the doors. Many of our warehouses have in goods one side and out goods the other side, and the doors are open all day long. So let's close the doors. That was a good starting point. The heating was in the roof. Just think about it. Why the hell would you put heating in the roof? You don't want to heat the roof up, you want to heat the people, and the people are down on the ground. So we brought the heating down, and then we thought we'd come up with something really good. We were told that for 30 years, ground source heat pumps have been working really well in the United States and elsewhere, and this basically uses the fact that if you go a couple of meters down in the earth, the temperature doesn't change all year round. The soil is actually quite a good insulator. So we flow lots of liquid through there and capture that heat and bring it back into our warehouse, where we blow it through a heat exchange unit into the warehouse. So we've ended up taking 960 tons down to 16. And we thought it was quite a good achievement, and the 16 is irritating me because, of course, I want to get rid of it. I don't want to go and buy 16 tons of carbon offsets. The 16 tons relate to the sandwiches. In fact, it's the people who didn't listen to their mum and they don't eat the edge of the sandwich after they've finished at lunchtime. And those go into landfill, they turn into methane, which is 23 times worse than carbon dioxide as a global gas, and so we have to do something about them. We're currently analysing what happens if we put them all in a big wormery. So if anybody knows the answer to the question of what do worms fart, I'd really like to know soon. Left-hand side, how it was before. Right-hand side, after we'd finished. The one on the right, I think you'd agree, is a nicer working environment. It uses half the amount of electricity to the one on the left. Payback period 2.5 years. This is really, really worth doing. We found economic value, not just competitive advantage, but actually operating cost savings in every project that we've done. And I just wanted to leave you with the thoughts of a man better than me. We can't carry on the way we were last year, the way we were the last decade. We have to change. We've got an opportunity to change now. The financial situation can't get much worse than it is, so why not take some dramatic action? Thanks very much.